Spider-Man and women across the universes tend to attract exceedingly dangerous foes. At a time where most of us are quickly scrambling to figure the ins and outs of high school life and homecoming dances, Spider-Folk, in this case specifically, Miles Morales, are thoroughly thrust into a world of great power and responsibility. Whether it's monstrous forms of symbiosis, masters of illusion, or nefarious inner demons, our favorite spiders heroically face them all, and often with quick wit and style. So let's take a closer look at some of the most powerful adversaries of the Ultimate, Miles Morales. Now, you may be wondering why Scorpion is ranked so low on this list. A supersuit, hybrid Scorpion physiology, and superhuman speed, strength, and durability? This is the version many of us may be the most familiar with, but there is another. Maximus Gargan of the Ultimate Universe is an extremely dangerous mob boss, and though he may not have the more well-known green scorpion suit and some of the powers associated with it, he was still an extremely dangerous foe, utilizing a chain and hook rather than a weaponized tail. His healing factor and superhuman strength made him one of the first real life-threatening supervillain menaces that Miles Morales had to face. Another gangster Miles faced was the monstrous Hammerhead. His powers are not hard to guess if you just look at him for a bit, specifically at his head, which looks a lot like the flat part of a hammer, and that he uses in the same manner that one might use a hammer. Can you guess what his ability is? His brick head is so tough that he is able to deflect damage from a point-blank range. His secret? An adamantium skeleton. Sound familiar? Add to that an extremely high tolerance for pain, and you've got yourself a very, very dangerous fellow. After throwing Miles through brick walls and almost landing a finishing blow, Spider-Man is saved by his friend at the last moment, Fabio Medina, who throws a bunch of gold balls at Hammer, creating a weird diversion. Miles is eventually able to overpower Hammerhead, but whenever you are dealing with adamantium bones, you must always be on high alert. Brock Rumlow, also known as Crossbones of the Ultimate Universe, has some of the most dangerous firepower around. Extremely determined and not really concerned much with trivial things like morality, when he sets you in his sights, there is not much that can be done. And to be considered skilled enough for the job of taking out someone who possesses the agility of a spider, that is no easy skill or task. Spider-Man knows not to mess around and not to take him lightly. Even with backup, this menace was still extremely difficult to face, holding his ground against Spider-Man, Cloak, Dagger, and Kitty Pryde at the same time. Even with additional backup, it was almost over with for Spider-Man until a behind-the-back sneak attack caught Crossbones off guard, surprising the mercenary and allowing Spider-Man a quick escape. Did you ever have one of those dreams where you're trying to run fast, but you just can't go fast enough? Or you're trying to jump and you just can't get high enough? Or you throw a punch and there is no effect? Terribly frustrating. And this is what it's like to fight against Anthony Master. Taskmaster of the Ultimate Universe has the ability to mimic your skills and your abilities. So when you fight with him and you're giving it all you've got, he just simply absorbs it. Congratulations, you're effectively useless. And then to add insult to injury, he can choose when to redirect the absorbed energy right back at you. This is how it went for Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, and Bombshell, who he ambushed and knocked out easily. He used an immobilizing gadget to subdue the heroes and made an attempt to unmask Spider-Man, intending to sell his secret identity for cold, hard cash. He didn't, as Miles was able to send a quick Venom zap his way, preventing this action at the last moment from his immobilized state, but things were not looking good for the trio. Good thing Cloak intervened when he did, trapping Taskmaster at a pivotal moment. If there's one thing that's apparent in the comics and the movies, it's that spiders and goblins absolutely do not mix. Whether hobgoblins or green goblins, there is always friction, and in this case, Hobgoblin, specifically Roderick Kingsley. With strength even greater than Norman Osborn's Green Goblin, he presents a considerable threat to the much lesser experienced Miles Morales. But lucky for the heroes he may find himself battling against, if there is no clear path to money to be made, then there is no clear reason for a fight to be had. He's a classic man, minus the Goblin super serum. So his allegiances and services can be quite fickle and swayed depending on the monetary source. Potentially, a nice billionaire with cash to blow could put the Hobgoblin to good use. After his pay was docked during his short time as a member of the Iron Spider's Sinister Six, he turned on them. He gets punched out by Sandman, and it was probably for the best. A prolonged battle against a cash-fueled Hobgoblin is not one that is going to go your way.
I'm free to go? Free? Nothing with me is ever free.
We have already seen on screen just how dire this Master of Illusion's threats can be, not just to Spider-Man, but also the world. And the comics are no exception. Once, Quentin Beck of the 616 universe operated a number of android avatars, infiltrating the Ultimate Universe, dethroning Kingpin, and taking his place. This is no easy feat, and many have tried before and failed. It's the Kingpin, after all. Crime lords tend to make lots of enemies. It takes a combination of Nick Fury, Peter Parker, Miles Morales, and hordes of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and even Thor to finally defeat this Ultimate Universe infiltrator, Mysterio. But the battle was hard fought, and Mysterio remains a thorn in the side of Spider-Man, and always an impending future threat. A lot of common trauma for Spider-Man seems to involve their uncles, and wherever there are complicated antagonistic familial relationships involved, it may not be the power they bring, but the emotional damage that they are able to inflict. Miles Morales' uncle, Aaron Davis, or the Prowler, may not be the most physically powerful villain on this list, but he's definitely a difficulty, especially for Spider-Man. Besides the strained uncle-nephew relationship of a do-gooder and criminal, it was the Prowler's law-breaking activities that were directly responsible for Miles' newfound great power and great responsibility. An accidentally stolen Oz-enhanced radioactive spider hitched a ride on the Prowler and then made a stop at Miles. This made him the Spider-Man that he is today, but you could also almost say that every hardship Miles has ever had to endure as Spider-Man is due to the Prowler. Ultimate Venom was born through the laboratory experiments of Richard Parker and Eddie Brock Sr. The experiment went horribly awry, and what was originally supposed to be a biosuit to prevent disease and heal wounds eventually became much more than just a biosuit.
So many sucks, so little time.
Miles' first encounter with the symbiote was through the biochemist, Dr. Conrad Marcus. It was Dr. Marcus who created the modified spider that gave Morales his powers. Conrad was on a mission to hunt down Spider-Man, eliminating the evidence that could be brought against him for the creation and escape of the experimental spider. Their encounter was one of tragedy, resulting in the loss of a very close family member for Miles. Miles was left with a deep-seated rage towards symbiotes, and particularly Venom. Venom is one of the most physically powerful foes the Ultimate Spider-Man has ever faced. He has also arguably inflicted the most scarring emotional damage to the Miles Morales Spider-Man so far. The Assessor is an extremely capable artificial intelligence that was able to easily kidnap Miles and experiment on him, extracting his DNA and using it to create clones. And whenever you hear the word clones in close proximity to the word Spider-Man, you know there is going to be a prolonged world of suffering for that particular spider-powered individual. For Miles, the kidnapping experience was horrifying, and he was left with PTSD after the event. Iron Man learned of Miles' ordeal and flew out to meet this Assessor. It is interesting to note that Tony Stark was initially taken back by this technology and decided to get a more up-close and personal look. They battle, and Iron Man is able to seemingly come out on top, but there is much more than meets the eye to the Assessor and his mission, and we will most likely see him and possible trouble caused by him for our heroes in the near future. Null, the god of darkness and symbiotes, and a god hell-bent on eradicating the light. It is no wonder he and Cletus Cassidy, the usual evil hosts of the Carnage symbiote, might find some commonalities. Powered by the Dark God, Carnage wreaks havoc across New York, possessing the bodies of heroes and villains alike. When Miles Morales was eventually possessed by one of the symbiotes of the Carnage army, he grew 6 arms. Miles later regained some mental control over this new symbiotic form and helped Eddie Brock and Venom take down this supercharged monster. Now, I do kind of wonder if the 6 arms thing gave Miles a bit of a leg up in his dangerous confrontation with Dark Carnage. Maybe don't bestow your enemies with extra arms to punch and shoot webs at you with. The ultimate genius sorcerer, multiversal threat, and sometimes self-appointed God King is one of the most dangerous foes, not just for Spider-Man, but for anyone across a universe who dares to test his patience or will. He is grandiose in his ambitions and confidence, but it is deserved. Ultimate Doom at one point kidnapped Miles for, once again, experiments. These genius scientists really have a thing for kidnapping Spider-Man. This really is becoming a bit of a trend. Who do you think the next scientist will be that decides to kidnap Miles? I kinda hope it's Doc Ock. Anyway, this Dr. Doom is for some reason defeated by Spider-Man with the help of the new Ultimates. Unfortunately, there was no time to celebrate as the universe-ending event known as Incursion soon followed. The battles within are always the most difficult. They're sometimes subconscious or hard to find and do not always manifest themselves in the ways you might think they would. But in this case, Miles Morales' inner battle unmasked itself right in front of his face, very literally. The villain known as Ultimatum, a native of the 616 universe, is the Ultimate Spider-Man's variant. Originally a violent criminal employed by and friend of Kingpin, Ultimatum wears the stolen gear of members of the Ultimates, making him extremely formidable. And as the Prime Universe's Miles Morales, he knows with a fair bit of certainty how the other younger, less experienced Spider-Man Miles thinks. It is revealed that it was Ultimatum that hired the Assessor and subjected him to the cold, clinical torment and cloning process. And one of the worst things about this, fighting someone who is you, albeit a slightly different version, is that you are easy for them to read. How you think, how you feel, and where you've been is information that a knowledgeable future variant like Ultimatum might have. And it is information that can be used to make your life exceedingly miserable. Which he does.
Slippery spiders. I can't stick to this honey.
What a terrible and powerful villain to find yourself against. There are dangers abound for all the Spider-Men around, but with unending determination and lots of cool abilities, I have faith that Miles Morales will be here for a long time to come. Let us know in the comments who you think might be an interesting future matchup for our Ultimate Webhead Jr.